Would I do that to you? I got to tell you, when I joined the Beatles, I'd written a lot of songs.
What's your favorite Beatles song?
Oh, there's so many. I still love Rain.
He never asked for the spotlight, never demanded the solo. Ringo Starr just sat behind his kit and kept the world's greatest band from falling apart.
For more than 60 years, people have described him as the luckiest man who ever lived. They saw him as the drummer who landed the ultimate gig. However, this perspective misses what truly mattered. Ringo was far more than someone who simply showed up. He served as the binding force that held everything together. During the heated arguments between John and Paul, Ringo continued playing his drums. When George decided to leave temporarily, Ringo remained committed to the group. During performances, when the audience screamed so loudly that the band members could barely hear their own instruments, Ringo maintained the rhythm that kept everything unified. He represented stability during turbulent times. Throughout his long career, Ringo has performed thousands of songs. He has covered popular hits and played lesser-known tracks. He has helped carry forward the legacy of the band. Yet, among all these songs, only 5 have remained constantly important to him. These 5 tracks felt genuine during times when everything else became complicated. They are not the obvious selections that topped the charts or pleased the largest crowds. Instead, these are songs that connected with him on a deeper level, continuing to resonate long after the music stopped playing. He still thinks about them during quiet moments alone. These songs held meaning before fame transformed their lives completely. Before the band grew larger than the music itself, these particular tracks represented something different and personal to Ringo. His favorites have never changed over the years. The first of these songs is Rain. While some drummers simply maintain steady timing on this track, Ringo did something different. He shaped and molded the rhythm in unique ways. Rain was not intended to be groundbreaking music. It was merely a B-side, the song on the flip side of the Paperback Writer single. However, Ringo perceived something special during those recording sessions. Where others heard empty spaces, he heard opportunities. Within those spaces, he discovered his distinctive voice as a musician. The year was 1966. The Beatles had decided to stop touring. There would be no more crowds screaming so loudly that the music became inaudible. Ringo recalled that they didn't know what would happen next. They simply entered the studio, experimented with different sounds, and everything worked out well. For the first time, they could actually hear what they were playing. What Ringo played on Rain differed from anything he had previously recorded. The tempo was slower and heavier, with pauses that felt natural, like breathing. Each strike of the drum landed with the impact of a raindrop falling onto calm water. Ringo once described the experience as feeling like he was swimming through the song rather than just performing it. The drums did not rush forward or push the tempo. They rolled forward steadily, like distant thunder. Every hit landed precisely where it needed to be, never too early and never too late. This marked the first time he felt like more than just someone keeping the backbeat. The rhythm itself became the star of the track. John's vocals were altered, slowed down and played backwards at the end. George's guitar created sounds like actual raindrops striking pavement. Yet Ringo's drums provided the foundation that allowed everyone else to experiment with unusual sounds. He created steady ground where the others could stand while everything else shifted and evolved around them. In later years, other drummers attempted to recreate that particular feeling. That relaxed, confident groove sounds simple, but proves difficult to master. They could hit the same notes and use the same fills, but they could not capture what made it special. The secret was patience, along with the trust that playing less could actually mean more. Sometimes the most important thing a drummer can do is understand when not to play. Rain proved something important to Ringo that day. He was no longer just keeping time. He was bending it, shaping it, and making it uniquely his own. For the first time, he realized that the quiet member of the band had something meaningful to contribute. The second favorite song is Tomorrow Never Knows. Revolutionary changes do not always announce themselves dramatically. Sometimes, revolution simply sits quietly behind a drum kit and waits for the right moment. Tomorrow Never Knows represented the sound of four young men from Liverpool discovering they could construct entirely new musical worlds. While John sang about turning off your mind and floating downstream, Ringo kept everyone anchored. He played one drum pattern, one hypnotic loop that repeated continuously. The studio atmosphere felt different during those recording sessions. Tape machines ran backwards, creating strange sounds that bounced off the walls. George had been reading about Indian music and meditation, learning about finding peace through repetition. Ringo grasped this concept immediately. He had always understood that the best grooves were the ones that disappeared from conscious thought, the rhythms you stopped thinking about and simply felt in your body. Ringo recalled playing the same pattern for 3 minutes straight without changing it. He never added fills or variations. He simply allowed it to breathe naturally. While everyone else experimented with backwards guitars and tape loops, Ringo became the heartbeat. He remained steady, unchanging, and reliable. He provided the element that made all the chaos make sense, serving as the anchor in a storm of sound. The drums were not recorded using normal methods either. They were close-mic'd and compressed, treated like another instrument rather than just the rhythm section. Each hit sounded enormous but distant, like hearing thunder from inside a cave. This was recorded in 1966, but it sounded like music from the future, or perhaps from a dream that nobody had yet awakened from. Most drummers would have attempted to show off their skills, adding fills and changing the pattern to prove they were actively listening. However, Ringo knew better. Sometimes, the most revolutionary thing you can do is trust the groove completely. Let it work its magic. Let it hypnotize the listeners, and let it carry everyone else to places they had never visited before.
The track became a blueprint for everything that followed in popular music: psychedelic rock, electronic music, and hip-hop beats that loop endlessly all trace their roots back to that moment when Ringo decided that repetition could be revolutionary. He proved that staying still could move the world forward. The simple became complex, while the complex became simple. Tomorrow Never Knows taught Ringo something crucial. His drums could serve as both anchors and experiments, both foundation and exploration. Sometimes doing less meant achieving everything. The quiet member of the band had learned to find power in stillness, and rock music would never sound quite the same again. The third song is A Day in the Life. Two separate songs became one unified piece. Four Boys became something else entirely. A Day in the Life was not planned in advance. It was an accident that transformed into a miracle. John had written a song about reading the news. Paul had written a song about catching the bus. Neither one was complete. Then they combined them and created what many consider the most important 4 minutes in rock history. The recording sessions felt different from the beginning. Everyone sensed they were creating something special. You could feel it in the atmosphere at Abbey Road Studios. People whispered instead of speaking at normal volume. Even the tea breaks felt important. Ringo sat behind his drum kit, observing everything coming together, knowing his job was to maintain stability while everything else became experimental and wild. The first section was John's part, melancholy and dreamy, floating through the air. Ringo played with soft brushes instead of sticks, creating light touches that barely disturbed the atmosphere. Then came Paul's section, bouncing and alive with energy, and suddenly Ringo's drums kicked in powerfully, like a heartbeat starting up again. The transition flowed seamlessly, like two different dreams merging into one. The real magic happened in the middle section, with the orchestral chaos. 40 musicians played whatever they wanted, building from nothing to everything. Right in the center of that beautiful mess was one simple snare hit, sharp, clean, and cutting through the symphony like a knife. That was Ringo keeping time while the world exploded around him musically. The final piano chord lasted 43 seconds. Everyone in the studio held their breath, listening as it faded away. George Martin, the producer, played it on multiple pianos simultaneously, but it was Ringo who suggested they let it ring until you could no longer hear it, until silence itself became part of the song. Ringo later said they knew they had made something they would never make again. It was like catching lightning in a bottle. This was significant not just because of what they created, but because of how they created it. 4 friends trusted each other completely, and Ringo, as always, kept the magic grounded in reality. The fourth song is Come Together. By 1969, the band members were barely speaking to each other, but they were still listening musically. The Beatles walked into Abbey Road Studios that summer carrying 4 years of hurt feelings and broken promises. John wanted to leave the band. Paul wanted to maintain control. George wanted respect for his contributions. Yet somehow, when they plugged in their instruments, the magic still functioned. Come Together proved that even a dying band could still catch lightning. The song started as nothing substantial. John was simply fooling around with an old Chuck Berry guitar riff, mumbling nonsense words that somehow sounded like poetry. Nobody understood what the lyrics meant, not even John himself. However, when Ringo heard it, he knew exactly what to play, not just what the song needed, but what it deserved. He created a groove so laid back it was almost falling over itself. Ringo remembered playing it like he was half asleep, but in a positive way, like Sunday morning when you do not want to get out of bed. The drums entered 4 bars into the song, dragging behind the beat just enough to make everything swagger with attitude. Each snare hit landed like someone dropping a heavy book. The playing was lazy but powerful, confident yet relaxed. The bass line was Paul's contribution, walking and sliding like it had nowhere important to go. George's guitar stabbed in and out with sharp little comments that never overstayed their welcome. But it was Ringo's drums that made everything stick together properly. The gloom that held the attitude in place, the heartbeat that made you move without consciously trying to. In the studio, the tension between band members was thick enough to cut with a knife. They barely looked at each other between takes. However, when the track became a blueprint for everything that followed in popular music. Psychedelic rock, electronic music, and hip-hop beats that loop endlessly all traced their roots back to that moment when Ringo decided that repetition could be revolutionary. He proved that staying still could move the world forward. The simple became complex, while the complex became simple. Tomorrow Never Knows taught Ringo something crucial. His drums could serve as both anchors and experiments, both foundation and exploration. Sometimes doing less meant achieving everything. The quiet member of the band had learned to find power in stillness, and rock music would never sound quite the same again. John wrote the lyrics while sitting in his childhood bedroom in Liverpool, looking out at the places he used to know. The Penny Lane Roundabout, the Cavern Club where they played early gigs, the cemetery where he used to sit and think. However, the melody and the heart of the song came later in the studio. Paul played piano gently and carefully, like he was handling something fragile. When Ringo heard the words about places remembered throughout life, though some have changed, he understood immediately. This was not just John's personal story.
It was all of their stories combined. Four boys from nowhere who went everywhere together. The song addressed friendship, growing up, and holding on to what matters when everything else falls away. George Martin played the Baroque piano solo in the middle section, recorded at half speed, so it sounded like a music box when played back at normal speed. However, it was Ringo's drumming that gave the song its heartbeat. He used soft brushes instead of sticks, creating gentle touches that felt like conversation rather than performance. He played as if he was afraid of waking someone up. The recording session differed from all the others. The lights were dimmed low. Everyone spoke in whispers. Even the studio felt like a bedroom late at night when you share secrets with your closest friends. They recorded it in just a few takes because it felt too personal to overwork, too honest to overthink. Ringo once said that this is the song he would want played at his funeral, not because it makes people sad, but because it tells the truth. It acknowledges all the people who help make you who you are. Perhaps that explains why it has stayed with him throughout all these years. Some songs do not just tell stories. They tell the truth about what it means to be human. These 5 songs represent more than just musical preferences. They reveal the heart of a drummer who understood that his role was more than about keeping time. Ringo knew that drums could provide emotion, create space, build atmosphere, and hold everything together when it threatened to fall apart. The best music is not always the loudest. Sometimes the quietest voice has the most meaningful things to say.